All right, so here it is, kids. Justin Bourne is in studio. You might know him as the dude that jumped onto this show and in this studio a bunch of times to help us, shoot the bleep on hockey and bail us out of a bunch of hockey preview shows that we had no business doing heading into big games on the network. And I've always been like super, super appreciative. So when I heard Bourne wrote a book, I'm like, anytime, my dude, this is going to be a lot of fun. Let's talk about it. Then I saw the name of the book, and I was like, okay, this is a different conversation. Down and Back on Alcohol, Family, and a Life in Hockey. I am still super stoked to have this conversation. You are a very talented writer. I found you because you were a very talented writer and really enjoyed reading what you wrote. And I remember you back in the days of The Score.
Yeah.
How did writing a book like this become part of the process for you?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. You know, a lot of it for me was people had seen the writing work I had done.
Yeah.
And had said, yeah, you should write a book. And, you know, for me, I was thinking about what would mean enough to me. The book was kind of like a tattoo. Right. And that, like, you don't want to do one that doesn't have meaning to you.
You didn't want to put a dolphin on your arm?
Right.
Yeah.
And there were people who were like, you should write a book. And it's like nothing really moved me in a particular way. But then you'd have these conversations about hockey where people would bring up whether it's my dad or the culture of hockey, and I'd be like, let's not talk about that. It's a little too close to home. And it's that close to home stuff that I think really resonates with people. And when you do start to have those conversations, it is amazing how much better you get to know people and where they come from and why they are the way they are when you start to have those conversations. And I was like, you know, if I share some of the harder things that I've been through, you know, there's something there where people can connect with it, see themselves in it, and we can talk more about hockey and just better understand the culture, the game, and the people. And I mean, I don't know, you only get one kick at life. What am I doing if not trying to do that kind of stuff? So end up being a meaningful endeavor.
I lost my brother. It's nowhere close. They're different things. There's an apple. Here's an orange, and we're not trying to compare the two. But when I opened up about it, there was some cathartic level in it. It was also hard as bleep, and I almost swore here. Yeah. Writing this book for you, was it cathartic? Like, alcohol had a grip on your life for a while. Yeah. Was it cathartic? Was it hard? Was it all those things?
It was. You know, there was a really low points in my life where I would, you know, in the worst of it, where my wife would just say, "You're not welcome home," you know, and I'd have to go find a hotel room or, you know, it got low, and I just say that to qualify, you know, how serious it got for me to write this book. But what ended up happening is I set out to write mostly my story, which is a lot of it is a hockey story, you know, covering sort of my journey and then touching on hockey's cultural points as I experienced them. But then I handed in my, you know, first few chapters, and the editor, Nick Garrison at Penguin, who helped me out a ton, would say, you know, this part here, you know, you're talking about junior hockey and you're going all these different teams, but you don't know the landscape. Didn't your dad play in the NHL? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, okay, well, you haven't mentioned where is he at this point? And I'm like, well, he's coaching hockey. Okay, well, what was that like? And you start to go through this process of like, oh yeah, like that part meant a lot to me. And I had to explore more of my dad's, you know, my relationship to my dad in regards with hockey and personal. And, you know, my dad is also someone who has been through the ringer with alcohol and sought treatment for it. So for me, the book was processing a lot of things that I didn't consciously think about. I kind of had to dredge up and evaluate and be like, it turns out this has been affecting me, and the book is my way of working through that a little bit.
I wasn't gonna read this, but when the release came out, I read a line and it said, I'll just read it for everyone here, including you. Down and Back is a frank, unflinching appraisal of the game and Bourne's relationship with it, the violence and danger, the booze and drugs, the consequences of fame. But it is also an honest look at what is redeeming about the sport through the eyes of someone who grew up in NHL dressing rooms, who has skated on NHL ice as both a player and a coach, and who inherited a game from a man he's grown better to understand by looking more closely at himself. And I want to be careful here because I've been around all sports, and I think there are similarities in all sports, and I don't want to just point to hockey, though I have redeemed hockey in my own eyes by going back into arenas that I once played in with my kids. But I do see like the pressure, I do see all of the things that would surround growing up as the son of someone who is as good as your dad. does this the relationship with how much does the sport angle play into how it affected you, or how much do we need to look into that?
No, it's really important. I think part of what has been hard over the years is like when I get introduced, and it doesn't bother me, but when I get introduced, look at this goal my dad scored, by the way. When I get introduced as the son of Bob Bourne. He won 4 Stanley Cups and was a key figure in that for those Islanders teams. So for me, I think what always bothered me was this assumption that I had advantage in hockey. Like, oh, your dad must have known someone on the junior team who connected you with this. Like, that was not my...
What was your experience?
No, that wasn't my experience for sure. And so my relationship with hockey, my dad was always a part of my life and always loved us, my brother and I, and stayed in contact, and we still have a relationship. And, he's read the book and has been supportive. It's been wonderful. But there were times where people would be like, oh, yeah, well, another, kid whose dad was in the NHL. And it's like, my actual hockey playing experience was my mom driving me to rink at 5:30 in the morning, and my mom and I buying new skates and trying to figure out which ones are good enough, and going through that process with her. So I guess my relationship with hockey, it just hadn't been what people thought it was, and so I just tried to express that through the book, and again, work through a lot of this stuff. A lot of people, man, it's like therapy doing it.
I'm going to ask for a little bit more time from the producers here just to get through a little bit of it, and I apologize if anyone was tuning in for 6 o'clock and what we do at 6 o'clock, but I need to walk this road because I've seen, and I give a bleep, and I'm going to swear like 5 times, and I keep just saying bleep, but I give a bleep about the athletes that sacrifice for our enjoyment, and sometimes I feel like the audience doesn't take that into consideration near enough. And I know that, the start of some of what you got into was because you had a crappy doctor on a team. Like, I was leafing through it a little bit. Like, there are people around that, should we be looking closer in these areas, in and around the sports that we love?
Yeah, you're right. That was the introduction. Like, my first year of pro hockey was just a pill year where we had a doctor that was he ended up in jail. He would go to parties and hand out, what do you want? Take your order, like it was McDonald's, basically.
Right. And I've heard those stories before.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. I was floored to see it at the time, but doesn't mean I didn't partake, like everyone else. I thought it was great then. But, it is interesting you talk about, what it does to the athletes. It's actually part of the end of the book grapples with that, with my, with Dad, who has had several concussions and struggled with I don't know if you think alcohol and the culture of hockey are intertwined in any way, but certainly there are reasons.
Yeah.
So
and more in the past than maybe now, but still, there's still issues in the game.
And so you look at it and go, was he dealt a fair shake, and how much of some of the tougher moments were his fault, or versus having been kind of put through the ringer to get the most enjoyment out of it and whatever for fans and everyone else. At the same time, I didn't want to villainize hockey because if you ask my dad today, he'd tell you that to achieve what he achieved and did what he did, and he'd do it again.
Yeah.
So it's hard and it's bad, but it's not something he regrets. So how are we to say you can't go, play this physical sport because it's bad for your head? And someone says, I want to, I'm willing to put myself in that line of fire.
Yeah.
It's complex.
Oh, it's very complex.
Yeah.
It's very tough. So, I mean, listen, we're not going to do this justice, and to do it justice, just read the book.
That would be nice.
Head to anywhere where you can buy fine books and the sort, and find this book. But do you know what you want people to get out of the book?
I have decided, yes. I have. I truly have.
Yeah.
The one thing the line that you'll hear if you've been listening to me is that I was what they call a low bottom alcoholic, in that I didn't lose my job or my wife or get a DUI or do something terrible.
Right.
But that doesn't mean it wasn't worth saving my life. I was going to lose those things. And when I first got in some of the rooms of recovery and I saw what people had been through, and people say, oh, you got to, you'll hit rock bottom. People think outside of those rooms, you'll hit rock bottom and you'll know it's time to turn around. Right. There's no rock bottom. You can always go back out and dig deeper and make it worse for yourself. And it just keeps happening to people who think they hit rock bottom, then they hit a deeper one. Mm-hmm. And so you decide what's rock bottom. And so for me, I saved my family, and I get to be in my kid's life and with my wife and stay employed because I picked the bottom. And it's a bad bottom. Like, the book goes more into, it's a bad one. But again, there's so much worse out there. So for other people who are like, yeah, I think it's bad, but I don't know how bad it is, you can call it bottom when you feel it's enough.
I knew you and I didn't know.
Yeah. I get that a lot.
Yeah, you were good. I knew you and I didn't know, and I think like that's part of the story that could resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that's the part that if you grab the book, and I hope you do, you can gravitate towards it.